This is how one special force unit is wreaking havoc in Iran, by dismantling nuclear facilities from the inside, eliminating top scientists in broad daylight, and leaving Tehran with 2 decades of questions and 0 answers. These aren't standard military branches, they're surgical instruments wrapped in secrecy, operating in places governments pretend don't exist. To understand how that level of capability is even possible, we first need to look at the deadliest special forces in the world. And it starts with a unit that wrote the hostage rescue playbook in 3 minutes. 10. Mogadishu's answer. On October 13, 1977, Lufthansa Flight 181 sat on a Mogadishu runway with 86 hostages and 4 armed terrorists inside. For 5 days, negotiations went nowhere. The pilot had already been executed, his body dumped on the tarmac. Then, West Germany sent GSG-9. Grenzschutzgruppe 9 was only 3 years old. Created after the Munich Olympics massacre exposed how unprepared German police were for armed terrorism. The unit existed for one reason: handle what regular law enforcement couldn't. But no one had ever stormed a commercial airliner before. Not successfully. At 2:05 a.m., 30 GSG-9 operators placed rubber-coated ladders against the fuselage. Silent. No metal. 2 teams moved simultaneously. One breached emergency exits over the wings, the other blew the forward doors with frame charges. Flashbangs. Gunfire. Chaos. GSG-9 cleared rows in seconds, isolating threats, double-tapping targets. 3 minutes, shorter than one pop song. When the smoke cleared, 3 hijackers were dead, 1 critically wounded. All 86 hostages walked off alive. They wrote the manual by not having one yet. Within months, every counter-terrorism unit on Earth was studying Mogadishu. The tactics GSG-9 used, simultaneous multi-point entry, flashbangs, swift isolation, became the foundation of modern aircraft rescue. The SAS copied it. GIN refined it. Delta adapted it. One 3-minute operation became the template. But here's what made it legendary. GSG-9 had no playbook, no training simulations, no case studies. Just operators, ladders, and a mandate that read bring them home. And they did. Today, GSG-9 operates across Germany and internationally. Embassy security, high-risk arrests, scenarios where precision matters more than firepower. They remain one of Europe's most respected CT units. Not because they're the loudest, but because they proved 0 acceptable losses wasn't idealism. It was operational doctrine. That was the textbook. But there's a force most of NATO forgot existed, until they executed a combat seizure faster than most people brew coffee. 9. Cold War survivors. GROM doesn't exist in most history books. For decades, Poland's special forces operated in total obscurity, hidden behind the Iron Curtain, trained by Soviet doctrine, deployed on missions Warsaw never acknowledged. Then the Berlin Wall fell. The Soviet Union collapsed. And suddenly, a force no one in the West knew about had to prove it belonged. They did it in 4 minutes. On March 21, 2003, as US and coalition forces pushed into Iraq, Polish GROM operators were handed an objective most units would call suicide: seize 2 offshore oil platforms in the Persian Gulf, before Saddam's forces could blow them up and turn the waterway into an environmental disaster. The platforms were armed, heavily defended, rigged with explosives. GROM fast-roped from helicopters onto steel decks under live fire, cleared hostile personnel room by room, and secured both platforms before anyone could hit a detonator. 4 minutes. Most people take longer to make coffee. The operation didn't just succeed. It announced GROM's arrival on the global stage. NATO commanders who'd never heard the name suddenly wanted them on speed dial. The unit that spent decades in Soviet shadow became one of the alliance's go-to forces for high-risk maritime and urban operations. But GROM's transformation wasn't just about one mission. It was about survival. When the Cold War ended, entire Warsaw Pact militaries dissolved. Budgets collapsed. Units disbanded. GROM could have disappeared into obscurity. Instead, they adapted. They retrained. They aligned with Western tactics while keeping the ruthless efficiency Soviet doctrine had drilled into them. And they became faster than almost anyone. That wasn't just tactical evolution. That was a generation of operators who refused to let geopolitics erase them. Speed is one thing. Saving everyone is another. The next unit proved you could end a hijacking at 30,000 feet without losing a passenger, if you're willing to climb the fuselage mid-crisis. 8. The Assault Doctrine. On December 24, 1994, 4 armed terrorists hijacked Air France Flight 8969 in Algiers with 227 passengers on board. They demanded fuel to fly to Paris, where French intelligence believed they planned to crash the plane into the Eiffel Tower. For 2 days, the hijackers executed passengers to prove they were serious. Then the plane landed in Marseille to refuel. And France's Gine decided talking time was over. Groupe d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie Nationale was created in 1974, after the Munich Olympics exposed how unprepared most countries were for terrorism on their own soil. France's answer was a unit that specialized in high-risk arrests, hostage rescue, and close-quarters combat in environments where one stray bullet could kill a civilian. They trained for airplanes, prison riots, barricaded suspects, scenarios where the room for error was measured in inches. 15 assault climbers stormed the aircraft from all access points simultaneously. Emergency exits, cockpit windows, the wings. The gunfight lasted 20 minutes, longer than most action movie climaxes, and ended with all 4 terrorists dead. 3 passengers were wounded by ricochet and shrapnel. 170 walked off alive. They saved 170 lives and caught heat for 3 injuries. Perfection is a harsh grader. But here's what made the operation work. Gine didn't wait for mistakes. They created the conditions for them. Distraction charges, flashbangs, synchronized entries that overwhelmed the hijackers' ability to respond. Passengers were pulled into aisles and shielded while operators cleared rows in seconds. The 3 wounded passengers weren't failures of doctrine. They were the price of fighting inside an aluminum tube. No one was executed. No one was used as a human shield. No one died because Gine hesitated. The doctrine was simple. Control the space, eliminate the threat, extract the hostages. Fast enough that the enemy can't think. Precise enough that you don't become the reason families plan funerals. Precision under cameras is impressive. Precision in a war zone with no oversight is dangerous. What came next had the highest kill rate in Afghanistan, until investigators started asking questions. 7. Desert operators. Australia doesn't talk about its special forces much. The Special Air Service Regiment, SASR, operates in near total silence. No press conferences, no Hollywood movies, no public victory laps. Just deployments, results, and a reputation among coalition partners that borders on myth. For over a decade in Afghanistan, SASR operators worked in Uruzgan province, one of the most hostile regions in the country. Taliban strongholds, rough terrain, minimal support infrastructure. While other coalition forces rotated through with large footprints and heavy logistics, the Australians operated lean. Small teams, long patrols, high lethality. And the math was undeniable. SASR had the highest enemy Kia per operator ratio of any coalition force in Afghanistan. Not the most total kills. Other nations deployed bigger units. But per capita, no one came close. The math was unmatched. Then investigators asked to see the work. In 2020, an official inquiry revealed allegations of war crimes committed by SASR operators between 2005 and 2016. Unlawful killings, executions of unarmed prisoners, blooding rituals where junior soldiers were allegedly encouraged to shoot detainees to get their first kill. The investigation didn't question the unit's effectiveness. It questioned the methods. And suddenly, efficiency became a courtroom problem. The SASR's Afghanistan deployment exposed a tension that exists in every Tier 1 unit. When you send elite operators into ungoverned spaces with minimal oversight, the line between tactical aggression and criminal conduct can blur fast. High kill rates look like success until someone audits the context. Australia's response was severe. Soldiers were stripped of honors. Criminal investigations were launched. The Afghanistan deployment became a case study in what happens when operational effectiveness outpaces accountability structures. But here's the paradox. SASAR remains one of the most capable special forces units on Earth. Their selection process is brutal. Their training is unforgiving. And coalition partners still want them on missions where competence matters more than optics. Because lethality doesn't disappear when it becomes controversial. It just gets scrutinized harder. Controversy shadows lethality, but the force that followed stopped a mass execution so close to the edge, they measured success in heartbeats and lost one of their own doing it. 6. The quiet professionals. Delta Force doesn't officially exist. The U.S. Army's 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta operates under a designation so classified that even acknowledging its existence violates protocol. No public roster. No unit insignia on uniforms. No memorial walls with names. Just missions that read like someone dared the impossible and came back with receipts. On October 22, 2015, Kurdish forces and U.S. advisors received intelligence that ISIS was holding approximately 70 hostages near Hawija, Iraq, and planning to execute them within hours. Mass graves were already being dug. The timeline was collapsing. Delta Force launched a raid in total darkness. Helicopters inserted operators directly into the compound. Gunfire erupted immediately. ISIS fighters defended aggressively, knowing exactly what losing meant. Delta cleared buildings room by room, pulling hostages from cells while bullets tore through walls. 70 hostages walked out alive. One Delta operator, Master Sergeant Joshua Wheeler, did not. They stopped in execution. The cost was one name the public would never forget. Wheeler became the first U.S. combat death in Iraq since American forces officially withdrew in 2011. His death made headlines. The hostages he saved did not. That's the Delta paradox. Success is measured in lives saved, but the only stories that break classification are the ones involving casualties. Delta was created in 1977 by Colonel Charles Beckwith, who modeled it directly on the British SAS after serving with them. The philosophy was simple: build a unit capable of surgical precision under the worst possible conditions. Hostage rescue. Direct action raids. Counter-terrorism. Operations where failure means international incidents and success means silence. They've operated in Mogadishu, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan. Missions so classified that even confirming Delta's involvement is illegal. But Hawija wasn't silent. It couldn't be. Because Wheeler's sacrifice forced the Pentagon to acknowledge what everyone already knew. U.S. Special Operations Forces were back in combat in Iraq, conducting high-risk missions in conditions as dangerous as anything from the surge years. Delta proved once again that elite units don't avoid risk. They run toward it, because someone has to. That was sacrifice with precision. The next doctrine trades precision for overwhelming force, and the body count reflects that math. 5. Soviet ghosts. Spetsnaz doesn't do subtlety. The name translates to Special Purpose Forces, but the doctrine translates to apply maximum violence until the problem stops moving. Born in Soviet military intelligence during the Cold War, Spetsnaz units were designed for sabotage, reconnaissance, and assassinations behind NATO lines. Operations where speed mattered more than optics, and collateral damage was a budget line, not a scandal. That philosophy carried into counterterrorism, and the results have been as effective as they've been brutal. In September 2004, Chechen terrorists seized a school in Beslan, North Ossetia, taking over 1,100 hostages, most of them children. For 3 days, negotiations went nowhere. Then explosions inside the gymnasium triggered chaos, and Spetsnaz stormed the building alongside Alpha and Vimpel units. The assault lasted hours. Gunfire ripped through walls. Rocket-propelled grenades turned classrooms into rubble. When it ended, 334 hostages were dead. 186 of them were children. Nearly every terrorist was killed. The Russian government called it a rescue operation. Human rights groups called it a massacre with a PR team. When the plan is overwhelmed, the math gets dark. Spetsnaz operators are trained for conditions where mercy is a liability and hesitation is fatal. Their close-quarters doctrine emphasizes suppressive fire, shock grenades, and aggression so relentless that enemies either surrender immediately or die fighting back. It works in certain scenarios. Hostage rescue is not one of them. But in theaters like Syria, where Spetsnaz deployed starting in 2015, the approach made more sense. Small teams embedded with Syrian government forces conducted direct action raids on ISIS positions and operated with rules of engagement that didn't require legal review first. They took territory. Eliminated high-value targets, did it with a footprint Western forces couldn't match because they weren't constrained by the same accountability structures. The controversy isn't whether Spetsnaz is effective, it's whether effectiveness justifies the cost, when the cost includes children's funerals and international condemnation. But Russia's special forces weren't built for global approval. They were built to solve problems the Kremlin couldn't ignore and couldn't fix diplomatically. That was aggression without apology. But the team that invented modern counterterrorism did it under live cameras with zero acceptable losses. 4. Who dares wins? On April 30th, 1980, 6 armed men walked into the Iranian embassy in London, took 26 people hostage, and demanded the release of political prisoners from Iran. For 5 days, negotiations went nowhere. Then one hostage was executed, his body dumped on the street as a deadline expired. That's when the British government stopped talking and started the countdown. At 7:23 p.m. on May 5th, the Special Air Service rappelled down the embassy walls, blew out windows with frame charges, and stormed every floor simultaneously in an assault so fast and so violent that TV cameras caught the flashbangs live. 17 minutes later, 5 terrorists were dead. 1 was in custody, and every surviving hostage walked out alive. The SAS turned a siege into a demo reel, and the world watched counterterrorism get invented in real time. Operation Nimrod became the gold standard for hostage rescue because it did something no one had seen executed at that scale. Room-by-room clearance under live fire with zero acceptable loss. The SAS didn't negotiate. They didn't wait for surrender. They identified threats, eliminated them in seconds, and extracted hostages while smoke was still clearing. One operator was photographed mid-breach, suspended on a rope, gas mask on, MP5 submachine gun ready. That single frozen frame ran on every front page the next morning, and defense ministries worldwide started making phone calls. But the SAS didn't start in embassies. They started in deserts, behind enemy lines during World War II, blowing up German airfields in North Africa with jeeps, explosives, and a mandate that read like someone's fever dream. Who dares wins wasn't a slogan. It was a job description. Fail, and you're dead or captured. Succeed, and no one knows you were there. The regiment became the blueprint for every Tier 1 unit that followed, from Delta Force to SEAL Team 6, because they proved that small teams with perfect intelligence could do what entire battalions couldn't. Make the enemy paranoid, spread thin, and bleed resources chasing ghosts. That was tactical perfection under cameras. The next operation happened in total darkness, on foreign soil, against the world's most wanted man, and the tech gap made it a massacre. 3. The Bin Laden Team. On May 2, 2011, 2 specially modified Black Hawk helicopters crossed into Pakistani airspace without permission, flew low enough to dodge radar, and landed in a compound in Abbottabad where Osama bin Laden had been hiding for 5 years. 23 Navy SEALs from DevGRU, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, better known as SEAL Team 6, cleared 3 buildings in 38 minutes. Bin Laden was shot twice, once in the chest, once in the head, by a point man whose name the public will never know. The team collected hard drives, documents and DNA evidence, loaded everything onto helicopters, and flew back to Afghanistan before Pakistan's military even scrambled jets. 38 minutes. Less time than a sitcom episode, counting commercials. Night vision doesn't make you invisible. It just makes everyone else blind. DevGru operates in a world where milliseconds decide who walks out and who gets zipped into a bag. The Abbottabad raid is famous because bin Laden was famous, but the operational mechanics, close quarters battle in total darkness, split-second target identification, room clearing under the assumption that everyone inside is armed or about to be, that's standard procedure for a unit that treats. Kinetic problem solving like a science. They train obsessively. Shooting houses. Urban mock-ups. Live fire drills where hesitation gets you killed in training so it doesn't get you killed downrange. And the technology gap is absurd. While bin Laden's guards operated with AK-47s and ambient light, the SEALs had panoramic night vision goggles, suppressed rifles, real-time satellite imagery, and infrared lasers invisible to the naked eye. It wasn't a fair fight. It was never supposed to be. The raid also revealed how far the US was willing to go without asking permission. Pakistan, a nuclear-armed ally, didn't get a heads up. The helicopters were stealth modified to reduce noise and radar signature. One crashed during insertion and had to be destroyed on site to protect classified tech. And the intelligence work that pinpointed bin Laden's location took years of courier tracking, signals intercepts, and surveillance so granular that analysts could describe the daily routines of everyone in the compound, down to when they hung laundry. That's not just operational capability. That's an intelligence apparatus, so deep it can follow one man's shadow across a decade until it leads to a third-floor bedroom in a city where he thought he was safe. Precision works when you control the environment, but when chaos spans an entire city for 60 hours, doctrine rewrites itself in real time. 2. Black Cats Unleashed. On November 26, 2008, 10 terrorists arrived in Mumbai by boat, split into teams, and attacked 12 locations simultaneously. Hotels, train stations, a Jewish center, a caf. For 60 hours they turned India's financial capital into a war zone. The Taj Mahal Palace Hotel became the epicenter. Gunfire echoed through marble hallways. Explosions ripped through luxury suites. Guests barricaded themselves while terrorists moved floor to floor, hunting. India's National Security Guard, the Black Cats, deployed from New Delhi. But they arrived hours late. Mumbai is 870 miles from the capital. The NSG had no permanent base in the city, no pre-positioned equipment. By the time they landed, terrorists had fortified positions, and the death toll was climbing. What followed was 60 hours of room-by-room urban combat broadcast live on television. A full work week compressed into one nightmare weekend. The Black Cats cleared the Taj like a building-sized puzzle, where every door could hide a gunman. They moved methodically, slowly, because speed without intelligence gets hostages killed. But methodical takes time, and time meant more funerals. When the siege ended, 166 people were dead. 9 terrorists were killed. 1 was captured. Mumbai didn't fit the drill, so they rewrote the drill in real time. The operation exposed brutal gaps: response time, equipment, intelligence coordination. The fact that India's premier CT force had to fly commercial airlines to reach the country's financial capital during an active attack became a national scandal. India's answer was immediate. Nuka hubs were established in major cities. Equipment was pre-positioned. Training shifted toward prolonged urban engagements. The Black Cats didn't just survive Mumbai, they let it reshape them. Because the unit that comes next didn't learn from mistakes. They learned by making none, and leaving a target government so paranoid it still doesn't know who to blame. 1. The Shadow War. Israel doesn't officially acknowledge that Keydon exists. There's no recruitment website, no press releases, no memorial wall with names. What does exist is a decades-long trail of operations inside Iran so precise, so devastatingly effective, that they've become case studies in how to wage war without declaring one. Keydon, Hebrew for bayonet, is the sharp edge of Mossad's operational blade. The unit that handles what diplomacy can't fix and what conventional military strikes would turn into international incidents. They don't capture targets. They don't issue warnings. They solve problems permanently. And they do it in ways that leave forensic teams holding evidence that leads nowhere. The philosophy is simple. If you can't tie it back to us, it didn't happen. And for Iran's nuclear program, that philosophy has been a waking nightmare for over 2 decades. In November 2020, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was driving on a highway outside Tehran, surrounded by a security convoy that had kept him alive through years of assassination attempts. He was Iran's top nuclear scientist, the architect of what Western intelligence called the Ahmad program, the covert push toward weaponization that Iran swore didn't exist. His motorcade had counter-surveillance, armed guards, route variability, standard precautions for a man on every targeted kill list in the Middle East. Then his car took fire from a remote-controlled machine gun mounted in a nearby Nissan pickup, operated via satellite link from hundreds of miles away. Fakhrizadeh died at the scene. The weapon self-destructed. Iranian investigators found shrapnel, bullet casings, and a vehicle registered to someone who didn't exist. No operatives on the ground, no faces, no fingerprints. Just a dead scientist and a message written in 7.62 mm rounds. But Fakhrizadeh wasn't the beginning. He was the exclamation point on a campaign that had been dismantling Iran's nuclear infrastructure from the inside for over a decade. In 2010, Iranian nuclear technicians at Natanz started noticing something catastrophically wrong. Centrifuges, machines that spin uranium hexafluoride gas at supersonic speeds to separate isotopes, were failing at inexplicable rates. Not all at once. That would have been obvious. Instead, they'd spin too fast, wobble, tear themselves apart over weeks. Maintenance logs showed normal operation. Sensors reported nothing unusual. And yet, rotor after rotor shredded itself into scrap metal. By the time Iran's engineers realized they'd been hacked, roughly 1,000 centrifuges, about a fifth of Natanz's operational capacity, were destroyed. The culprit was Stuxnet, a computer worm so sophisticated that cybersecurity researchers called it a guided missile in software form. It didn't just infiltrate Iran's air-gapped nuclear network. It lived there undetected, quietly rewriting the logic controllers that regulated centrifuge speed while sending false data back to monitoring systems. To the technicians, everything looked fine. To the centrifuges, they were being ordered to self-destruct in slow motion. Here's the elegant part. Stuxnet required physical access to closed networks and granular intelligence on Siemens industrial control systems that only a handful of people in the world understood. It also required knowing the exact configurations at Natanz, rotor speeds, cascades, facility layouts. That's not hacker in a hoodie work. That's joint intelligence operations with assets on the inside and engineering teams reverse engineering classified equipment. The US and Israel have never confirmed involvement. Iran has never stopped accusing them. And Natanz's uranium enrichment timeline got set back 18 to 24 months, about as long as it takes to earn a master's degree. Except this one came with exploded centrifuges and a cybersecurity bill Tehran is still paying. But the campaign didn't stop there. In April 2021, an explosion tore through Natanz again, this time targeting the facility's internal power system and destroying advanced centrifuges Iran had installed to replace the ones Stuxnet destroyed. Iranian officials called it sabotage. Western intelligence didn't comment. And the pattern continued. Mysterious fires at military facilities, explosions at missile production sites, drone strikes on Iranian weapons convoys in Syria. Each incident plausibly deniable. Each one precisely targeted. each one eroding Iran's ability to project power while giving Israel just enough separation to avoid direct retaliation. Then came the assassinations. In addition to Fakhrizadeh, multiple Iranian nuclear scientists have been killed over the past 15 years, shot in traffic, bombed in their cars, eliminated in ways that suggest detailed surveillance and flawless execution. And in 2024, reports emerged of targeted strikes on senior Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders inside Iran. Operations so bold, they suggested not just intelligence penetration, but active networks of assets, willing to operate on Iranian soil under the noses of one of the world's most paranoid security states. This is how one special force unit is wreaking havoc in Iran. Not with invasions or airstrikes that CNN can broadcast, but with a hybrid warfare model that blends cyber operations, human intelligence, remote weapon systems, and old-fashioned targeted killings into a campaign Tehran can feel but can't prove. Mossad's Kidan unit has turned deniability into an operational model, and for 2 decades, they've demonstrated that the most devastating wars are the ones no one can definitively say are happening. Iran knows who's hitting them. They just can't prove it in a way that justifies full retaliation. And that's the point, because when your enemy can't respond without looking paranoid or weak, you've already won.